Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. A little late, but that's okay. I'd like to go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Okay. Do we have anybody from the public here to speak? Seeing none, okay. We're going to go to modification of permit for permit number 568 for the proposed hotel and restaurant and related improvements.
Good
Go
evening.
ahead. Good evening.
My name is Peter Alter. I'm a lawyer. I practice law in Glastonbury at the firm of Alter and Pearson. And we appear here tonight on behalf of the development that's proposed at the intersection of the on-ramp for I-91 North and the Silas Deane Highway. You're going to hear from Kevin Johnson, our landscape architect from Close Jensen Miller, as well as Dean Gustafson, who is our wetlands expert, to discuss the matters that will be before you this evening. But I wanted to remind everybody, it's been a while since some members of this commission saw this application, 2019 to be exact. And I know there are some new members who didn't see it at all. So if you'll bear with me for a couple of minutes, I'll summarize where we were and how we got to this evening. In 2019, we had an extensive permit application before this agency to secure wetlands permits for activity to develop both a restaurant and a hotel on this site. You'll see as Kevin and Dean make their presentations that this is a very technically challenged site. It has wetlands areas that are your jurisdiction. It has Eversource, Helco, CL&P easements that run across it. The MDC has an easement that runs across it. And we're constricted by CONDOT, not only because the Silas Deane Highway is a state highway, but because we are at the intersection with an on-ramp of I-91. So that it took us quite a long time to put together a site plan and a permit application to secure approval for the development. The development is fully approved as of the final Planning and Zoning Commission approval that occurred after we had finished with this agency. In moving forward, obviously there were a number of issues that, or perhaps not obviously, but there were a number of issues that presented themselves, not the least of which was the pandemic, which caused all developers to reconsider their positions, particularly those in the hospitality industries. Not the greatest time in the world to commence a project of hotel and restaurant facilities with people hunkering down because of the pandemic. During that time, we haven't been without activity. Close Jensen and Miller, in anticipation of beginning this project, along with the developer online who's here this evening, continue to work with CONDOT over the interplay between us and them in terms of the Silas Deane Highway and the entrance ramp to I-91 North. The MDC in terms of the easement that has to be relocated on the site as part of that work. So that we continue to work on those issues. As part of that, Close Jensen and Miller undertook to do some geotechnical investigation with respect to the small water crossing, the wetland crossing that we have to do at the access drive for the site. So here comes the challenge. I'm told that you all can now see a site plan on your screens. This is a great advancement for us to have this opportunity, to have this kind of access. The You're seeing the developable portion of the site. There's a substantial amount of property that you don't see on this plan, 7.5 acres, goes all the way back to Old Main Street. That will all be committed to a private conservation easement and preserved as open space. The development envelope is shown on this portion of the plan. You can see the access ramp to I-91 and our intersection with the Silas Deane Highway, which lines up with the roadway on the opposite side of the Silas Deane. That is a signalized intersection, which is why the driveway is located in the position that you see it. Our original plan called for a span that would reach from one side to the other of the driveway in order to allow the swale that carries storm drainage. It moves from the south to the north, generally in that direction. And our original plan, the plan that gained approval by this agency, contemplated that that would be the manner in which we would address the water course in that particular area of the driveway. In advancing the investigation on the geotech side of this, and Kevin will go into much more detail than I am, it was determined that to do so would cause a great deal more disturbance than was originally anticipated because of soil conditions there that did not lend themselves to a simple installation. And so with Ron's approval, Close Jensen and Miller went back to look at alternatives that would be more appropriate and more easily installed with less ultimate disturbance to that particular water course. And so one of the reasons why we seek to amend the permit that was granted in 2019 is to change the manner in which the driveway will cross the water course and substitute a 54-inch culvert crossing as opposed to the span crossing that was originally proposed. Carries the same water, carries it to the same place, and follows the discharge pattern that was previously existed. So it's really a change of methodology caused by the conditions that were determined to exist after we secured the original approval from this agency. The second part of our amended permit, the part we also seek your approval of this evening, is to address the conditions that we find in the wetland immediately to the north of the crossing, that area that's shown in green along the entrance ramp to I-91. We asked our arborists to go out and examine the conditions out there. Turns out that a great many of the trees that are in the site are either dead or dying. The conditions there are not favorable to promote good growth and healthy trees, so that there's a lot of material that would need to be removed. When Mr. Lyman was advised of the conditions of that area, he felt that it was appropriate to re-engage with both Kevin and Dean to come up with a better plan for enhancing that wetland, offering greater visibility for the site, and improving the conditions that would exist once the site is developed, both from an aesthetic standpoint, but also from an environmental standpoint in terms of enhancing the wetland that exists along that highway ramp. You'll see on a larger map, which will be presented later, how that continues on to the north and east, ultimately leaving our site through the private conservation easement area that we propose to establish. The proceeding tonight is really to seek an amendment to the permit that you granted to change the method by which the driveway will intersect with the wetland going out to the Silas Deane Highway, and to allow us to conduct activities within the wetland to remove the dead and dying trees and to enhance the environment there by a whole new set of plantings and upgrades from what currently exists. Nothing else in the plan has changed. We have all of the same safeguards that were presented in 2019. All the erosion and sedimentation controls remain in effect and effective. We continue to be ready to present the 7.5 acre private conservation easement to the town. All of that remains the same. And the internal development, although we have a change in the user in the restaurant, the internal development also has not changed in any way that impacts the wetlands considerations that you'll have this evening. Luckily, our economy seems to be much more conducive to this development going forward. Mr. Lyman is anxious to move ahead with his plans to develop the site. He's worked on the site for a long time. He's owned it for 20 years.
He wasn't born yet.
So his son Sam is here, he's 23, and he wasn't born yet when Mr. Lyman bought this property. So its time has come. We think it's an appropriate method to offer up to you in terms of dealing with the conditions that we've determined exist and to find a way to enhance the wetland corridor, which you'll hear about from Dean. So with that, Kevin.
For the record, Kevin Johnson. I'm a landscape architect with Close Jensen and Miller. So just a quick orientation with the slide that's on the screen. So again, Attorney Alter made some references to certain aspects. To the top of the screen is Silas Deane Highway. Direction north in the I-91 northbound on-ramp is to the right. The Sutton Road neighborhood is to the bottom of the screen. Marshall Road and the Howard Johnson's hotel are to the left. The solid blue, that represents Valley Brook. It flows west to east. The brown represents the two proposed buildings, the restaurant. On this plan, it was a Longhorn and the Wood Spring Suites Hotel. The blue dashed lines, that represents wetland areas. The green dashed represents the 100-foot upland review area and the mid-year flood. Again, as Attorney Alter mentioned, our site drive was designed to align with Water Chase Drive across the street, and where the pointer is now, that was the proposed arch bridge. This proposed site plan that was approved also had 197 parking spaces. So this, advancing to the grading plan, generally the topography of the site slopes from the southeast to the northwest. Again, with that magenta line representing the 100-year flood, to elevate portions of the hotel above that 100-year flood required that we do some excavation in the southeast portion of the site and do filling over in the northwest portion. For those of you who were on the commission 3 years ago, you'll recall that we had retaining walls at the edge of the parking. We primarily included those to limit fill and disturbance not only in the floodplain but also in the upland review area. Moving on to site drainage. So again, throughout this site we have a series of catch basins, subsurface piping. Generally everything is, well, this one system where I'm pointing to now just conveys stormwater from a small portion and discharges in the area of the pointer here to the wetlands. The remainder of the site, a series of catch basins, subsurface piping, everything is directed to an infiltration basin located at the north end of the site. We have 3 general discharge points for storm drainage, 1 here and 2 at the infiltration basins. Each of those before the discharge included a water quality structure. We had riprap scour holes at each of those outlets. We had an area of pervious pavers in the parking area to the rear of the hotel. Because, again, we were in floodplain with fill, we could not have any loss of flood storage. So we designed an elaborate subsurface system of 60-inch diameter pipes. They basically surround the proposed hotel. And floodwater would enter through this structure right here into this underground series of pipes. Moving on to site utilities. Along the Silas Deane Highway currently, where my cursor is, there's an existing sanitary line. Because of the arch bridge, that would have impacted that sanitary line and required that sanitary to be relocated. And that's coming from the southeast, or southwest, excuse me, onto the site. Following that was electric and telecom. We were proposing to access those utilities from an existing Eversource pole in that southwest corner of the site. Domestic fire service and gas, they were coming from Silas Deane through the site drive. All utilities were being brought onto the site from Silas Deane Highway, and then appropriately connecting to either the restaurant or the hotel. Moving on to erosion and sedimentation controls. So we had a series of material stockpiles with silt fencing. You'll see later that those material stockpiles have been relocated. I'll show that on the next set of plans. That was a requirement of Eversource. But we have, again, silt fencing around the material stockpiles, around all the limits of disturbance. We had silt fencing, hay bale backed up by hay bale dams. We had surface swales conducting surface drainage to a temporary sediment trap. Scour holes and riprap check dams, silt fencing, silt sacks at existing catch basins in Silas Deane Highway and at the entrance drive to the Howard Johnsons. We also illustrated 2 construction entrances. The preferred construction entrance was from the Silas Deane Highway. The second was an alternate proposed location at the end of Sutton Road. So we also developed, or the soil scientists developed, 2 wetland management plans. What's illustrated on WM1 is an area of mitigation. This was to be done behind a couple of the houses on Sutton Road. There was also an area illustrated by this shading enhancements along the riparian corridor of Valley Brook. On the 2019 plans, we had a wetland disturbance, project wetland disturbance, so that would be within the DOT right-of-way as well as on site, of 2,550 square feet, and we were doing a mitigation area of approximately 8,000 square feet, so about a 3-to-1 ratio. The enhanced areas equaled approximately 27,400 square feet. And between wetland management, WM1 and WM2, basically there's plant charts for the enhancement areas, for the mitigation area, mitigation notes, proposed wetland creation area notations, monitoring notations, a schematic wetland creation, planting plan, and so forth. And the plan currently on your screen, this is the conservation easement that Attorney Alter mentioned. Basically, it's the shaded area. It begins at the Eversource right-of-way and goes all the way down to Old Main Street. And it's approximately 7.9 acres in area. So that's a recap, brief recap of the 2019 approved plans. So moving on to the 2022 plans, briefly, you can see the site drive is aligned in the same location. We still have the restaurant space, the hotel space. We do have it switched from Longhorn Steakhouse to Olive Garden. The front door of the Olive Garden restaurant is located, will be facing, the Howard Johnson's facing south, whereas Longhorn's was facing Silas Dean. The hotel footprint expanded slightly because we took one of the floors off of the hotel. That was a product of the planning and zoning process. With that footprint expansion, we did lose approximately 6 parking spaces where I currently have the cursor. So we've reduced the parking by 6 spaces to 191. But retaining walls, the infiltration basin, drainage, grades, everything else is pretty much in the same place. I mean, the retaining walls and infiltration basin there's no changes to those at all. Again, we'll get to the utilities. There are some slight changes there. So as Attorney Alter mentioned, in early 2021, we began working diligently with MDC, with Eversource, with ConnDOT in anticipation of the structural design for the Arch Bridge. We commenced a series of geotechnical borings. The result of those borings, it was very poor soils, much poorer than had been anticipated. It was going to require a really elaborate structural design consisting of deep piles, pile caps, so forth. There, as I mentioned, there was also the sanitary sewer, MDC sanitary sewer, which parallels the east side of Silas Dean Highway. In working with MDC, I'll try and put it kindly, the MDC was not thrilled that they would have to relocate that sanitary line. Also working with ConnDOT, we approached them, again, trying to put it mildly. ConnDOT was also not thrilled with the Arch Bridge in their property. There's also some considerable erosion along the western embankment of this man-made drainage ditch. So we did, as Attorney Alter mentioned, we did a reevaluation. So between ConnDOT, the erosion of the man-made ditch, MDC, the poor soils, the structural design would have required, for the Arch Bridge, would have required us to come back to this agency for an additional amendment. In 2019, we had anticipated being able to span that entire intermittent water course, but with the structural requirements, we would have been into that wetlands. So again, we did a reevaluation of all these elements and felt that perhaps the best solution was to amend the plans and extend this 54-inch pipe and create a riprap scour hole about where my cursor is. We contacted ConnDOT again. They reviewed our plans for the 54-inch pipe extension. They were much happier with that versus the Arch Bridge. Because switching to the pipe and that would require filling and removing of the existing vegetation that we had anticipated saving on either side of the entrance drive originally with the arch bridge. Once it became apparent that that vegetation was going to be removed, we also started to evaluate if this was an opportune time to evaluate, again, as Attorney Alter mentioned, doing an additional evaluation of the existing trees, basically this general area that I'm circling with the cursor. We had a field meeting with ConnDOT and staff in June of last year. ConnDOT asked us to perform a field survey of all the existing trees within that area, and also to hire an arborist to perform an evaluation of all those surveyed trees, which we did. So we surveyed approximately 110 trees. As it turns out, I believe it was just over half of those trees were dead. A significant proportion of others were either in poor health, dying, diseased, poor structure. If my memory serves me correct, I think there was about 30 or so that were alive, but several of those, many of those were considered invasives, either black locust, Norway maples, and the such. So again, we contacted ConnDOT. They asked us to prepare a revised plan, which we did. And it took a while for ConnDOT to, shall I say, come on board. They had some reservations at first, but they realized that we were doing a lot of improvements, creating a diverse and new habitat with native species. A lot of the trees that even appeared to be alive out there were actually covered in poison ivy and other invasives and such. So just going through the 2022 plans now, again, these are basically the same plans from 2019, just to run through them quickly. Again, this is the site grading. You'll notice the retaining walls, same location, infiltration basin, scour hole, all of that is the same. There was just some minor tweaks to this graded swale here as a requirement of Eversource. The most significant grading change is, again, along the 54-inch pipe along Silas Deane Highway and the grades around the scour hole. All the other grades in the parking lot remain the same. Again, advancing to the drainage plan. Again, the most significant change on this is, again, that 54-inch pipe. All the other pipes are the same. Because the Olive Garden now faces the Howard Johnson's Hotel, there was a catch basin located almost immediately in front of their proposed door. So that one catch basin slid maybe 10 to 15 feet to the west. Everything else is the same. Because of the 54-inch pipe and the filling that we're doing within that intermittent water course, portion of that affected the floodplain. So we did have to increase the length of some of the 60-inch RCP compensatory flood storage pipes beneath the paving. I think we added one leg here. But again, that doesn't affect any upland review areas or wetlands. That's all contained below the proposed parking. The site utility plan. On the current plan, all the site utilities will be coming in the site drive. As you recall from the 2019 plan, I mentioned we had a utility pole in the southwest corner of the site where we anticipated getting electric and telecom. Eversource, for technical reasons, advised us, basically told us that we could not access that pole for our electric and telecom, that we would have to come off the site pole just on the south side of the proposed entry drive. So that reflects that change. Again, as I mentioned, that sanitary line, which would have had to be relocated, you recall it came diagonally across this parking lot. Once we switch to the 54-inch pipe, that sanitary line can now stay in place. Water services, domestic and fire, I believe they just shifted over slightly in the drive aisle. Gas shifted over slightly. But again, all utility services are coming from Silas Dean, and minor changes to the rear of the Olive Garden. Some of their utility connections come in a different location than the Longhorn Steakhouse did. But again, there's no effect on the wetlands. Moving on to erosion and sedimentation control. As I mentioned, on the 2019 plans, we did have some material stockpiles within the Eversource right-of-way. The Eversource right-of-way is about 100 feet wide along the southerly and easterly property lines. Eversource was concerned with bucket loaders and so forth operating there, that there could be conductivity issues with the overhead lines. They asked us to move them over here outside of their right-of-way. So in essence, what that means is that the hotel would be the first building constructed and the restaurant would be the second building constructed. All the other erosion controls, construction entrances and so forth remain the same. The only addition is along Valley Brook on both sides of where we would be doing the tree removal. We're calling for proposed either core logs or natural material filled filter socks along both sides of Valley Brook. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to our soil scientist, and he'll give you some background, more background on the wetlands and proposed plantings.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Good evening, folks. I'll just start with a brief description of my qualifications. My name's Dean Gustafson. I'm a senior wetland scientist and professional soil scientist with All Points Technology, Waterford, Connecticut. I've been a wetland consultant for going on 34 years. So I haven't been working on Ron's project for my entire career, but it's pretty close. I have qualifications in maintaining registrations with the Soil Science Society of Southern New England, Connecticut Association of Wetland Scientists, and the Association of Massachusetts Wetland Scientists. Also, like yourselves, I have volunteered my time on my own Inland Wetland Commission in Lebanon, Connecticut, where I've been a member for over 25 years. So I commend you all on your dedication to preserving wetland resources in the town of Rocky Hill. Kevin's done a very good job at discussing the minor changes being proposed with this permit modification request. And what I'd like to do now is to put those minor changes into context with the actual wetland resources on this property. And I think through that discussion, you'll see that the proposed minor modifications are such that they actually are minor, particularly in context with the wetland resources. So on this graphic, we have identified two, for descriptive purposes, two wetland resource areas. Wetland 1, which is principally associated with Valley Brook, this highlighted feature in blue. The wetland boundary is identified by this heavier dashed line on either side, and you can see that it's a relatively narrow riparian corridor system. Historically, it's been heavily altered, particularly from generally in the 1950s to the 1970s through development activities on and off the property associated with particularly the creation of the 91 interchange and also continued development along the Silas Dean highway. Of particular note, this section of Wetland 1, this feature here off in the southern portion, kind of the southwestern portion of the site, that feature is not part of Valley Brook proper. That consists of a man-made ditch. It conveys primarily stormwater runoff from Silas Deane Highway and surrounding commercial developments. It is regulated as an intermittent watercourse under your regulations, and that's mainly because the drainage system is intercepting some seasonal high groundwater, so there's a base flow to that feature, and so it qualifies under the intermittent watercourse definition requirements. But just to drive home the point, its primary function is what it was intended to do, was to convey stormwater runoff. When they installed the drainage along Silas Deane Highway, obviously this is on Condot property, it was a convenient location to daylight the pipe and then let it flow through a man-made channel to Valley Brook. So that's its principal function and value. In addition to those wetland resources, we have another isolated wetland feature we identify for descriptive purposes as Wetland 2. This is kind of centrally located in the eastern portion of the site. This wetland is not a naturally occurring wetland. It was created by historic fill of the property, dense glacial till fill material and poor grading, and it's resulted in an area that sustains enough depressional water to support wetland vegetation and has redoxomorphic characteristics in the upper 12 inches of the soil profile that it meets the classification definition as a wetland feature. The history of that was reviewed through various historic aerial photograph interpretations, as well as a geotechnical investigation that was done historically on the property by Clarence Welty. And in this particular area, the geotech investigation confirmed that there's over 9 to 10 feet of fill material in this area. So it's not naturally occurring, and as such, because of its isolated and small nature, it supports limited functions and values. So those two features are what this application was originally proposed to impact. With a minor modification, we are extending out the pipe through this section of the constructed drainage swale feature, and essentially we are proposing for the modification to expand our original impact to that feature. But from a wetland function value characterization standpoint, its principal functions is conveyance of stormwater. That function will remain with the 54-inch culvert, so we don't see this as significantly affecting wetland functions and values with this minor modification. As Kevin had alluded to earlier, this is an arborist performed a tree survey of the subject property and the DOT property. This kind of shows the detail of the surveyed location of the tree, the various trees within, particularly within the riparian corridor for Valley Brook. They're both trees were surveyed within the wetland limits as well as the upland review area limits. And the trees are graphically represented by dead trees that have X's through them, and the yellow points are for trees that are in poor health condition, and then the green trees are identified as healthy trees. But as Kevin had noted earlier, there's a significant proportion of those healthy trees are considered invasive trees, black locust, and Norway maple. And so this is just a tabulation of all the trees, their condition, the species, etc. And I'll just flip through to what's probably more important is, based on that data, We worked closely with Kevin and his landscape team, and also, with the Condot Environmental Group. A major portion of this enhancement plan is located on DOT property, and I don't know if any of you folks have ever had to deal with the environmental group at Condot, but they are a very talented group. They deal with a lot of environmental effects from roadways. They're extremely knowledgeable. So they were concerned to make sure that if we are going to do some select removal of trees and improve this area, we actually improve the Valley Brook riparian corridor. In addition to the plans that were issued to them, we had to submit an environmental evaluation of the plan, how it would affect Valley Brook, were there any possible detrimental effects from the proposal. They were mainly concerned about erosion during clearing activities or once clearing is performed and the planting has occurred before things are finally permanently stabilized. Are there going to be any erosion concerns? So, and then also the species distribution, what they were looking for a compilation of native smaller, short-growing trees and native shrubs and an understory of native herbaceous vegetation. So we work closely with the entire project team, including Condot, to come up with a fairly robust enhancement plan. And so what this does is, I won't go into every individual planting area, but there is an extensive planting plan, high density and high diversity of native short trees and shrubs, and seeding with native seed mix that will enhance the Valley Brook riparian corridor. Understand though, Valley Brook, this section of Valley Brook is considered an urbanized stream. It's impacted by the watershed that feeds this point within the stream reach, which is dominated by a high commercial development. So the hydrology of this stream is somewhat flashy because of the high amount of stormwater runoff, and it's also affected thermally by that stormwater runoff. So this isn't a cold water resource stream. It has a fairly high temperature. Understanding that though, if we're enhancing the riparian corridor and removing dead trees, we still want to try to enhance shade cover on the stream system. And we can still accomplish that with shorter growing trees and native shrub species. And so that plan was dovetailed into this planting plan to not only enhance some of the habitat cover, but also try to retain some of the natural shade on the stream system, so that this proposed plan won't thermally impact the stream that's already kind of degraded. I'll just point out that this is a fairly short, a fairly small forest patch on the stream system. Just as you kind of go downstream in this section of the property and just off property, there is an Eversource transmission right away that cuts across it. So there's no canopy growth underneath that, whatever, 150 foot wide transmission corridor. But even still, we wanted to try to, at least for this small reach of the stream, provide those necessary enhancements to provide a plan that, we can feel good about, the Wetland Commission can feel good about, that we're doing the proper things to try to make this stream as good as it possibly can be. We have extensive notes on the construction sequencing and protection measures, the planting schedule for all the different plant species. These next two sheets just show sectional views from nearby roadways, I-91 and Silestein Highway. The one thing that we did analyze is, with the removal of kind of the degraded forest canopy, the dead trees, it's going to improve view lines into the proposed site and the development. We also wanted to evaluate that with respect to what we're proposing for a planting plan. And so what we're showing here is just some of the mature growth in the riparian corridor. Valley Brook is kind of centered in through here, and it's labeled on these sectional views. And here are just some additional views from from some of the access areas and the surrounding roadways. So as part of the original proposal that was approved by the commission, we had developed a fairly robust suite of mitigation measures to compensate for the project's unavoidable activities within the two kind of man-made degraded wetland areas, as well as the upland review areas to Valley Brook. That part has been still retained with this proposed modification. No changes have been made to that. So I'll just kind of briefly describe some of the major elements. We are providing a wetland creation area, as Kevin had mentioned, in this portion of the site, approximately 8,000 square feet of new wetlands that'll be attached immediately adjacent to this wetland system, this forested wetland system. That'll more than compensate for the project's 7,256 square feet of resource loss. We are, as part of the Valley Brook Enhancement Planting Plan, that is kind of dovetailed in with our original plan to enhance this area in the upland review area. We're also, a major part of that is that the understory of Valley Brook corridor is dominated by woody invasive shrubs, multiflora rose, there's bittersweet, there's bush honeysuckle. Those species will be removed as part of this enhancement plan, the mitigation plan, and then we'll obviously be replacing those with the native plants, the native shrubs, short trees, and herbaceous material. So that'll provide a significant enhancement to the wildlife function of Valley Brook by removing invasives and utilizing native species that'll be have a higher utilization rate by native small animals, birds, etc. The project is obviously consists of a lot of work in and around Valley Brook, and so we felt it would be important to implement a wetland protection program. Essentially what it is, an environmental monitor, a wetland scientist will be assigned to the construction project. We'll go through a pre-construction contractor training session to make them understand the environmental sensitivity nature of the project site, importance of protecting wetlands in Valley Brook during construction, and also review all of the mitigation measures so that they fully understand how the project's construction and the enhancements dovetail with protecting this resource throughout the course of the construction duration. And then finally, as Kevin had referred to earlier, as well as Attorney Alter, what was originally proposed was a 7.9 acre conservation easement, consists of forested wetlands and adjacent upland habitats, and those are kind of in the southeastern region of the subject parcel. That'll be protected in perpetuity. So when you combine all those elements together, it's a fairly robust mitigation plan for some, somewhat small resource impacts. And with that, I will hand it back over to Attorney Alter to conclude our presentation.
Thanks, Dean. So we've given you all the background on how we got from 2019 to 2022. And I think Bob will agree with this, that principally what has driven our request to amend our permit is the change conditions that we discovered relative to the driveway and the creation of an appropriate crossing. And then once that was something that appeared to us to be a necessity in order to accomplish this development, it was an opportunity to enhance the wetland downstream from that and to much improve the aesthetics and value of the site in its, not only in its appearance, but in its functionality as a wetland. But the other message that we're trying to deliver tonight is we didn't make any other changes. The plan that you approved in 2019, it remains substantially intact except for the enhancements that we just discussed. And we would ask that you amend the permit to allow us to go forward as we've described this evening. We're all here to answer questions. In addition to Dean and Kevin, we have our arborist, Alex Lapilla, is here, as well as our site engineer, Chris Zavidio. Sorry, Chris. Who are here also if you have questions that may come up in their areas of expertise. So we're happy to answer any questions you might
Okay.
have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Schweitzer, do you have any questions?
Yeah. First off, and I probably missed it a few years back, but in the heading towards water quality structure 1, your ENS plans show smaller pipes than what's shown on your proposed drainage. If I look at sheet 10 of 20, you're showing 12 and 24-inch pipe and a riprap scour hole. For a 24-inch pipe, you don't have a detail for a 30, and your drainage plan on 8 of 20 shows a 15 and 30s heading there.
I'm sorry, you said page 10 of 20?
Yeah, 10 of 20.
Is-
I'm seeing,
Is that on the 2019 set?
yes,
Water quality structure?
heading down near number 1, towards the bottom. Bottom of your sheet, almost running perpendicular to Sutton Road.
Towards the scour hole.
The scour's here.
And I see a proposed CL basin. I don't see a water quality structure.
No, that's on, sheet A is where your water quality structure is. I'm just looking at that line that runs parallel to your property line, perpendicular to Sutton Road. Sheet 10 shows a 12 into a 24, and then into the scour hole. Your drainage plan shows a 15 into a 30, then into the scour hole.
Gotta be talking about this here, right? Okay. Inch there, we got a 15 there.
I can show you right here if you want to.
Well, let's go see what he's got.
I was just looking at these lines here. That's a 12 and a 24. And then when I come to your drainage, you're showing a 15 and a 30. I'm assuming you want the 15 and the 30.
Oh, I see what you're getting at.
Then you just have to
Okay.
update your scour
Yeah,
hole.
we can fix that. Which one does the drainage report say? 30?
I think it's the 30.
Yeah, okay.
No big deal. I thought it was just an oversight. Believe me, I know. All right, so the 54-inch pipe, you're crossing the sanitary. I see you have a drop, you kind of have a drop structure with the manhole there. What sort of clearance do you have with that sanitary main?
Okay. let me explain what the manhole's for. There's a,
Chris, can you state your name for the record also and speak into the mic so we can all hear you, please?
sorry about that, I get carried away. Chris Zabidio, Close Jensen Miller, PELS. So, the manhole is there. There is a substantial MDC sewer line that crosses this water course there. It is subject to erosion. It gets washed away by the heavy flows. So we extended the 54-inch past that, but above it.
Yep.
And so to drop it down reasonably, we're putting a manhole structure there.
Yep.
So the manhole structure is, obviously it's going to be a turbid flow situation, but then the outlet of that is going to flow into that DOT appropriately sized scour hole. And appropriately sized meaning a 54-inch pipe is a big pipe.
Right.
And so that's a fairly large scour hole.
Yeah.
And so the purpose of the manhole is to give that 3 or 4 foot drop after it comes over the MDC sewer.
Understood. My question was, what's your clearance with the sanitary line there? What's the size of the sanitary line and what's your
Oh,
clearance?
the size of the sanitary line, it's this is hard to answer because it's a relined pipe, so they tell me that the inside diameter is 39 inches.
Okay.
I don't know what the actual material is, so I speculate that the outside diameter is probably closer to 45, 46 inches or so. So our vertical clearance on that, I believe, is 2 feet.
Okay. All right.
Because we tried to do this without putting a concrete collar over the MDC pipe because they're reluctant to do that. I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's a good solution, but you know they've had problems with that pipe in the past, and so they kind of want to baby it. I hate to use that term in regard to a sanitary sewer pipe because it's not appropriate in some regards, but they're afraid of it, and for good reason. I mean, it's the trunk sewer to the plant that's down on the other side of Old Main Street. So it's kid gloves when it comes to that sewer line.
Okay. Do you have a water handling plan for the 54-inch pipe for when you extend that?
I would say probably not unless you're referring to the calculations we did to show that the 54-inch pipe is still valid.
No, could you provide us with a water handling plan? How
Oh,
you're
sure.
going to install that 54-inch and handle water should you get a storm while it's being installed?
We can do that.
Okay,
The
thank you.
watering plan, okay.
The, your wetland impacts increased from 2550 to 7254. Did your wetland area mitigation increase?
So the wetland creation area stayed the same. That did not increase.
Okay, so we don't have a 3-to-1 ratio anymore then? We have a 1-to-1 ratio?
That's correct. It's closer to 1-to-1 for creation to impact.
Okay.
But that obviously doesn't incorporate all of the other mitigation that's being provided.
Okay. You're right.
I'm sorry, Peter. Didn't see you there.
I think that's all I have for right now, Mrs. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kurtz, any questions?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Commissioner Kelly?
Thank you. I have a question, and perhaps it was you, Attorney Alter, who said it early on. You talked about proposed construction entrances. If my memory serves, there was discussion of a construction entrance on Sutton, but that was eliminated. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's no entrance on Sutton.
Our plan calls for the construction entrance to be on the Silestein Highway.
Okay.
We had an alternative on Sutton Road, but we're very aware of the concerns that the neighbors have there, and we would want to avoid them probably more than they would like to avoid us.
That's what I recalled. And I want to make a comment on your wetlands assessment report. I thought it was amazingly thorough. I mean, I don't
Say
think
that
I've
to
ever
the wrong
commented on
person.
one of these before, but really, and the fact that you're going to educate the contractors and you're going to give them a class, basically on the best practices for this, I mean, it's really great. I think it relieves a lot of the concerns that we would be
I
thinking about.
sincerely appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
All set?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Brown?
Okay, I have a first question for, I think, Dean, you can answer it best. The water that's coming through the 54-inch pipe, you said that's intermittent, correct? So it's not a constant flow, there's nothing living in there. Any life that's in Valley Brook doesn't go up that direction.
Yeah, that's correct. It is an intermittent flow. There's primarily flows, during storm events and then for a few days afterwards. And it's heavily armored. It's both the banks and the channel are riprap armored. So it's, it doesn't mean that, some of the aquatic organisms that are in Valley Brook couldn't make their way up there. There just isn't great stream bed habitat for them to really sustain a life cycle.
Right, because that was my question, because the scour hole, I would assume the scour hole is now cutting it off. That there's not going to be like a continuous waterway through the scour hole up the pipe.
So the way the scour hole would be designed is really to take out the energy of the outfall from the pipe. During flows, there's still an ability for anything that's trying to move, would try to move upstream into that area. But we wouldn't want to really encourage that because all it does is get into a closed drainage system, pipe system in Silestine.
Right.
In actuality, they're going to follow kind of the natural stream bed within Valley Brook, even though it goes under a fairly large, culvert. It would try to follow probably that stream system.
Okay, all right. And the second one, the second question I have, it might be more for Kevin than you, but I'm not sure. I need to be educated because when I saw the planting plan and all the trees were low, and when I saw the arborist report with all the dead ashes and elm, those were all tall trees, and then this is, I think of dogwoods more ornamental than native, and so there's all the low trees coming in. I should back up a little bit. Everything that died is really in the Valley Brook review area, the wetlands. If we tried to plant anything in there tall or big, it's not going to survive. Or would it have a chance of growing if we put, obviously not an ash with the emerald ash borer, but if we tried to put a taller canopy in, it's not going to thrive. I want you someone to answer that a tall tree isn't going to make it if we tried to put something in the wetlands.
Yeah, I mean, so from an ecological standpoint, this is kind of a tough location to really sustain, any real large mature growth. That doesn't mean that you couldn't plant, a larger tree and it wouldn't necessarily thrive. It potentially could, but there's a lot of stressors in this area. It's essentially surrounded by development, high human level of activity, and so those stressors, and maybe the arborist can discuss this a little bit more, but those stressors are going to have an adverse effect on some of the larger trees, and you can see that, for the ash trees, there's obviously more of a regional issue with respect to diseases that are affecting it, region-wide, not to this just particular site. But several of the other trees that are non-ash species have been affected by its location, and particularly, impact from invasive, vines and whatnot that have kind of suppressed that and caused some of the mortality in the tree growth. So what we're trying to accomplish with the planting plan is primarily focusing on providing enhancements to Valley Brook. And we're doing that through use of a variety of native species, both low-growing trees as well as shrubs and herbaceous material. And so that's the principal function of the planting plan. The secondary function is, there is a need to improve sightlines into the proposed development. So and CONDOT was also in agreement with improving sightlines because, a lot of this activity that we're proposing is on their property. So they were in agreement with kind of those main principles of establishing this planting plan.
Okay.
So I don't know if anyone else.
Hi, Alex Lapilla, Lapilla Arborist and Design LLC. A lot of people here already know me, but your question was, could you plant taller trees?
Right.
Yes, you could. I think I was very impressed with what they came forward with. So a lot of the trees that they suggested in this design, around the brook itself, there's trees with heights of 10 to 25 feet. So some of these trees, such as they have alder in there, serviceberry, even the dogwoods. I think there's a couple different varieties here. They're looking anywhere 6 to 10 to 15 feet mature. So they're going to still provide a lot of shade to that brook, which is, I think, what they're after. And also the lions are going to be a lot better. So a taller tree in there. There was a lot of the brooks. A lot of the trees that were alive were in close proximity to the brook were rather tall, and the issue was that there's just a lot of erosion because they're near a brook, and they're falling over, or they're going to soon. So by shorter trees that are going to establish better roots around this area, and I think they're going to provide more erosion control than a bigger tree that doesn't have so much under it, maybe because it's choking out a lot of the undergrowth.
That was a good answer, the root structure. Yeah, because that was, ash, you know how tall ash gets. And
Yeah.
The plant plan, nothing was over 20 feet
Right.
full grown. It's like, well, that's not what's there now, but that led me to the question, what's there now is also dead.
Right, it is. And a lot of that, the Emerald Ash Borer took out a lot of those trees, but there's a lot of trees that have, like I said, just fallen over. There's cottonwoods in there that are, growing at a 45 now, or they're hazardous to even work around because the roots are exposed, the balls are half out of the ground, and they're not faring that well in there. I think the lower growing trees that they're suggesting are going to do a lot better with any type of windstorms that come through too, just because we seem to get a lot of those. But it's only getting worse. All right, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it did. Thank you very much. No more questions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Stevens.
Just had a couple questions mainly with the 54-inch pipe that's going to be replacing the arched original bridge and the additional impacts. So like we were saying before, we're going from a 3-to-1 creation, I guess, to 1-to-1. Is there any other opportunity for additional creation on that eastern, the 7.9 acre area, that we could do some more wetland creation over there?
Yeah, that's more you.
So we could certainly consider expanding that wetland creation area. One thing that came up during the 2019 deliberations and some of the public comments that were received is that the homeowners that are this wetland creation area is behind them. They had concern about not necessarily creating new wetlands, but now these new wetlands will have an associated upland review area that now will encroach into their backyards and affect potential future development, expansion of their houses or additions or putting in a pool or deck or whatever. That's kind of a balancing act. It's a legitimate concern as a homeowner. It doesn't necessarily preclude them from doing it, but now it requires them to go through a full permit process with this commission. So we kind of balance that with, understanding that, we're going from a 3-to-1 to essentially a 1-to-1 for as far as the direct impact to creation. But when you put it into context with what these resources, what they're actually functioning as, the majority of the impact is associated with a man-made drainage ditch, which its principal functions is conveyance of stormwater. The wetland creation area that we're providing, it's immediately adjacent to a fairly large forested wetland system. It'll be providing services to a number of important wetland functions and values that these impacted wetlands don't currently. So although from a square foot to square foot comparison, we're at 1-to-1, but functionally we are providing much higher services with the wetland creation area. So we thought that was that was an acceptable trade-off. And then when you consider all the other mitigation that's being proposed, the planting plans, enhancement of Valley Brook riparian corridor, we felt that it was still a very robust mitigation plan that, although, you know, we're not from the creation to impact, we're just at a one-to-one. When you bring it all together, we're at a much higher level, particularly when you look at it from a functional and value standpoint.
What about if you did some additional invasive species control in that lower or that eastern conservation area?
For the conservation easement?
Yeah, like maybe where the neighbors' houses are.
Yep. No, we could certainly incorporate, you know, some invasives removal in and around the proposed wetland creation area within that adjacent wetland system.
That would help it to not, you know, migrate into the creation area too.
Yep. Yeah, no, so I think, you know, we haven't discussed this internally, but I think we'd be happy to, you know, provide an area of, you know, at least 8,000 square feet of invasive treatment in and around that wetland creation area to kind of put those invasives at, you know, have them stand off for a while before, you know, the wetland creation area takes hold.
And then getting back to the invasive species control plan and then the planting plan, how many years? And it was a little confusing because I think some of it I read that it was like a year or something with the DOT and then maybe different for the rest of the site. What are the, like, how long are you going to maintain the invasive species control, and how long are you going to monitor your plantings and all that, like 3 to 5 years? Or
No, that's a great question. So it does get, I can understand it gets a little convoluted with kind of bringing in the modifications, and particularly the Valley Brook restoration plan that we worked with ConnDOT on. But I think it's clear in our mitigation sequencing notes, particularly the monitoring section, that for all of the mitigation, all the enhancements, the wetland riparian enhancements, the control of invasives, the wetland creation area, all those mitigation areas we've monitored for a 5-year period. And we have, I think, 4 different performance standards. One of them is triggered by invasives, a percent aerial coverage of invasive species. So if at the end of the 5-year monitoring period, you know, one or more of those performance standards isn't being attained, then we're going to continue, you know, the monitoring, doing the corrective actions and the monitoring for an additional year until we achieve all of the performance standards.
So you will actually do some corrections, as you say, not just monitor it, but you'll actually, if you think.
Yeah. So exactly, and that's a great point, Scott, because if, you know, it's not uncommon, particularly for invasive species control, that, you know, you got to continue to control it and monitor it. So I would fully expect that, you know, during construction there'll be an initial treatment of invasives throughout the site, all the mitigation areas. But typically we see that, you know, you need to keep on that control for the first 2 to 3 years to really tamp down those invasives and let the natives kind of control. So after year 1, you know, our monitoring sequence is that, you know, we monitor twice during the growing season, generally in the mid to late spring once things are fully leafed out, and then again towards the end of the growing season. And if we see at either of those 2 inspections, we see invasives, you know, starting to get a foothold or whatnot, we're going to make recommendations for corrective actions at that time. We'll work with Ron and his development team. We'll bring in the appropriate contractors to control those invasives every step of the way, so that at the end of our 5-year monitoring period, we're attaining all of those performance standards and we can close the project out.
And then with the plantings, again, it was a little confusing because I think on the DOT it said that you would replace anything with a warranty or whatever of 1 year, but would you actually be replacing anything that doesn't, any of the plantings that don't survive for 5 years then?
So the way we develop these planting plans is that we are generally using smaller plants at a much higher quantity, so that we can sustain some mortality We have, some of our performance standards are triggered by aerial coverage of native species. And so if, you know, we're planting 100 shrubs and we lose 5 of them, we're still going to sustain the 80% aerial coverage of native species. If we lose 20 of them, we're going to replant.
Right.
And so we'll continue to monitor the health of the plants. We're asking, as far as the performance standards and kind of the standards of the plantings, you know, we're going to hold the landscape contractor to guarantee those plants for a 1-year period. And that's really a critical period where they need to make sure that they, you know, they're putting in root growth, they're putting in vegetative growth, and, you know, if they need to, they'll have to irrigate to guarantee those plants for a year. To try to have the landscape contractor guarantee beyond a year, it's not only extremely difficult to get that guarantee, but it's, you know, you pay anywhere from 3 to 5 times the cost of the plant to pay for that guarantee. So there's a diminishing return, but that first year is critical. So
I think most of the planting plans that we look at that go through the town here, we ask for like a 3 to 5 year monitoring, and then if any more than say 10 to 15% mortality rate occurs, then we ask to have the plants replaced.
yep, and then that's in line with the notations that we provided in the mitigation plan.
So you would do something similar with all your plantings too?
Yes, we would.
Okay. Yes, that's all I got.
That's all?
Okay. Commissioner Whalen?
Just one quick question about the culvert. What's the total length of that in feet?
The extension of it,
Yes.
105 feet.
That's all. That's all, thank you.
I don't know if they heard you out there, but it's 100, you said 105 feet?
If my memory's any good, it's 105, give or take. And the length is more, not as much to get past the driveway, but to get over the MDC shore. Otherwise, it could be 20, 25 feet shorter, but
Yeah, so it's shown on your plan as 170 feet, you know, just for,
170?
Okay.
Oh,
For the
just for
manhole.
correction, you know.
So much for my
So
memory.
it's 170. It was 100 and something, you were close.
Thank you.
Can I just say a couple of words regarding the site and what we've been doing and not doing for the past year, actually 24 years, since my memory goes back to 1998 on this site. We've been working with this team right now for the proposed modification or amendment of the permit for the past year or so. We too have been pretty impressed with the planting plans and the plans that they provided. We have been meeting with the DOT, with them, with a lot of other people on site, to see to it that hopefully that this proposal will be a much better proposal than the proposal that was even done in 2019. So, you know, to refresh your memory, the reason why Sutton Road was being used as a temporary construction entrance was because the bridge that was proposed along the Silas Dean required them to access Sutton Road to build the access for the Silas Dean. Once that access was built, then Sutton Road was going to be shut down, if my memory serves me correct. So I'm thinking that we can ask them to completely shut down Sutton Road. However, I'm thinking that they might need still Sutton Road to install the 170 feet of pipe. And then at that point, once that's installed, they can start using the Silas Dean Highway and shut down Sutton Road. Because, I mean, you know, they've been very mindful of the neighborhood and their issues. So have we, and we want to keep traffic and disturbance to the neighborhood to a minimum. So if that's something that they will agree on, that will be great. Regarding the amount of wetland disturbance that's on site, of course, you know, the pipe and the water course is going to get filled. There are going to be some more wetlands disturbed. They explained to you how they're going to compensate for that. The ratio of wetlands that is going to be decreased to a 1-to-1. there's ways of mitigating that aside from invasive species harvesting. You can also increase the amount of low-impact development practices on site. I believe they're proposing to the, I want to say to the northeast side of the parcel, there is, I believe it's around 20 parking spaces that are going to be permeable blocks. If that's something that your applicant will consider, you could increase another row of 10 more to compensate for the amount of wetland disturbance that is taking place on site, and basically make the proposal even better. With regards to the permit, the existing permit, the 2019 permit, if this committee would like to vote on it, you can vote on it tonight. It will be an amendment to the permit. It's not going to be a new permit that requires 2 meetings. The only change that I'm going to have to make, if you decide to grant the amendment to the permit, is to notify the DEP in the reporting form and change the form to reflect your changes. That's all.
If I might, we like Mr. Alvarado's suggestion on increasing the area of permeable pavers. Glenn has indicated that's certainly a good idea that he would be happy to embrace as part of this plan.
Thank you.
Through the chair, can I ask?
Sure. Go ahead,
I
Commissioner.
A follow-up question too on the filling. Since we're going from the 2,500 to the 7,200 square feet of filling, is that going to trigger anything with federal wetland permits that you're going to need to get with the Corps?
Yes, yeah, there is already a trigger for the Army Corps' jurisdiction. We're going to assume that even though it's a constructed stormwater feature, it would still be considered a jurisdictional wetland area. There may be some question as far as the isolated wetland, whether it's jurisdictional or not, but it is fairly close to Valley Brook, so we're going to assume that the Corps would take jurisdiction over the entire impact area, and we will be filing an appropriate application with that agency.
Would they require 2-to-1 mitigation? Creation?
So this project's kind of unique as far as the area of impact is we're just above the 5,000 square foot threshold, as you're aware, on a self-verification notification form process, which is essentially anything less than 5,000 square feet of federal jurisdictional wetland impacts doesn't require any mitigation. Mitigation may be required for what we're anticipating filing a pre-construction notification submission, but it's such a small area of mitigation, of impact. I think that the Corps would consider the comprehensive suite of mitigation, both the enhancements and the creation area, as appropriate compensation. But we'll be, it's a separate jurisdictional issue. It's, it's a good question. We'll work that out with the New England district.
Okay. Any further questions? Nope. Okay. Do I have a motion?
Okay, let's see, to the chair. I make a motion that we vote tonight to amend the permit number 568, the proposed hotel and restaurant and related improvements on land south of I-91, exit 24, on-ramp north of Howard Johnson, and make the various modifications to the 2019 permit as spoken to tonight, and entertain that they add additional permeable pavers to their parking area as just suggested.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second?
Any discussion?
Can I read to you what
Ms.
those are, if you don't mind?
Oh, yes, please.
Yes, please do, Bob.
Yes,
No, go
Bob.
ahead.
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, so I have Number one, drainage discrepancies on sheet 8 and sheet 10 to be fixed to reflect the proper size of the pipes. Number two, the watering plan to be provided and to be approved by the staff. Number three, invasive species in other areas of the proposed conservation easement to be harvested. Number four, more low impact development practices to the extent of plus or minus 10 more parking spaces to be implemented along the northeast corner of this site. I'm not sure if you have any more.
Just for clarification, that's the water handling plan for the installation of the 54-inch pipe?
What, the dewatering plan, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? All right, let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, folks.
Okay, thank you.
Do I say we'll miss you?
Okay, next thing on the agenda, actions taken, minutes from the approval from the March 9th, 2022 meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes. from the-
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion. I have a few things.
Okay.
Can we please change the first line of that from Chairman Brown called the Wednesday meeting to,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
please, thank you. And then can we also switch Marnie Liska from an alternate to a commissioner and change Mukesh Desai from commissioner to alternate, please?
Gotcha.
And should Leslie be,
I'm an alternate, but I'm
Ye-
you care.
Yeah, I guess it's the weather, the way it's lined up, it just got a little funky
Okay.
there, but yeah.
to be designated an alternate?
Yeah. Oh, and
Line up.
yeah, I should just add to the record, that's my bad, just add it to the record that
Okay.
Leslie was, Commissioner Kurtz was voting in place of Commissioner Liska. Thank you. Okay. All right, let's vote. All in favor of the minutes and the changes? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Okay, next thing, discussion, plan of conservation and development.
Yes, Madam Chairman, we did meet. Most of the discussion was focused on sidewalks and biking areas, predominantly in a triangle from, let's say, the center of town down to the river. So it could encompass Glastonbury Avenue, Washington Street, Riverview. It's tricky, because if you picture the area, there's not a lot of frontage to work with. But that was our discussion. So, yeah, we had a good meeting.
Good. What is the consensus of the sidewalks? Are they,
Thank
We're
you.
all in favor. It's how do we make it work,
right?
you know?
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, keep us updated on that sidewalk, definitely. Status report, various projects.
Well, this is going to be short. So you know MDC that has done a lot of clearing throughout the town. They're basically done with the clearing. Now they're going to go to the next phase, which is the study of the infrastructure, the pipes and the manholes. So that's going to be coming next. Just wanted you to know that you know they're moving ahead to take down the quotas and placing and proposing a different restaurant there. So they're going to be coming before you. I'm thinking at the next meeting. The farm, Straskas Farm, I believe the bid package to take down the house and the other structures went out this week. So hopefully we can get that done and move on. The Olney Street subdivision, which is the 14 lot subdivision that was approved, almost opposite or near Marshall Road, that has not begun. That is going to begin shortly again. As you know, the court case was settled. It was signed, so that's all in the clear right now. I have no status on the foundry, remain as is. And also the former Rocky Hill landfill. The DEP has not really given us any updates on that either. And as you know, Ames was approved. They're working on minor modifications to the site, and hopefully they can get all the remaining permits approved and move forward with it. And that's about all I have.
Okay, great, thanks, Bob. Open space.
Yes, we had a meeting, the Farmland Acquisition Committee. We were to have an update on our punch list for Straska and the layout of the property. One of the presenters was ill, so we didn't go forward, so hopefully this coming meeting will have more information.
Okay, great, thank you. Legislation?
None.
None, and conferences?
None right now, no.
Okay, great, thank you. Correspondence and communications?
The only correspondence that I did place, and I know that some of you went to the Freedom of Information, the workshop that we had on the 31st of March. I did place some of the handouts that were given at that conference. I think it was well attended, right? You would agree. And I always get something out of it. Just basically be mindful of what you do, and if you don't think you should be doing something, well, don't do it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what the town attorney tells us,
Right.
So, but
That
anyways,
was-
you're welcome to read through it, and you'll find that the presentation informative also.
Right, that was a very informative session. Other business? Nothing? Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.